I'm Tracy, a single mom and software engineer in Chicago, the one who always keeps family gatherings running without a complaint. For my son's birthday, I poured my heart into making it unforgettable at the local ice rink. The air inside the rink smelled of cold rubber and stale popcorn, a scent that usually triggered a wave of nostalgia, but today, it only churned my stomach. I had spent weeks curating this moment. I could still feel the phantom weight of the invitations in my hands, the heavy cardstock on which I had handwritten the time and date in meticulous calligraphy. I had confirmed with my mother, Carol, 3 times. I had sent a calendar invite to my brother, Sean. I had even called my father, William, the night before, listening to his grunt of affirmation before he hung up to watch his evening news. They promised. That was the currency I had been trading in my entire life, their promises against my labor. I looked at my son, Leo. He was sitting on the wooden bench, his small feet dangling in oversized rental skates, the laces pulled tight enough to cut circulation but loose enough to wobble. He was wearing the paper crown I had made him, the gold foil catching the harsh fluorescent lights of the arena. There was a cake on the table behind us, a chocolate masterpiece. I had stayed up until 2 a.m. baking, icing it with the precision of a surgeon. 6 candles stood ready to be lit. "Are they lost, Mom?" Leo asked. His voice was small, barely audible over the sound of other families laughing, blades carving into the ice, and the thrum of the Zamboni in the distance. I checked my watch. 2:30 p.m. The party had started at 1 p.m. "I'm sure there's just traffic, honey," I lied. The lie tasted like ash. Chicago traffic was notorious, yes, but not like this. Not a complete radio silence. I pulled out my phone again. No missed calls. No texts. The screen was a black mirror, reflecting my own rising panic. I opened the family group chat. The last message was mine, sent 4 hours ago. Asterisk. "Can't wait to see you all. Leo is so excited. Asterisk." Read by everyone. Replied to by no one. By 3 p.m., the ice rink manager, a kind man with a thick mustache, gave me a sympathetic look that felt like a physical blow. He didn't charge me for the extra hour of the party room, but his pity was worse than a bill. My son looked up at me, his wide, innocent eyes scanning the empty chairs where his grandparents and uncles should have been. He didn't cry. That was the part that shattered my heart into a million jagged shards. He didn't throw a tantrum. He just sighed, a sound far too heavy for a 6-year-old chest, and reached out to hold my trembling hand. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "Just you and me is enough." I forced a smile, feeling the skin around my eyes tighten with the effort to hold back tears. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a mixture of sorrow and a white-hot anger that was beginning to kindle in my gut. "You're right, baby. It is enough. You and me against the world." We ate the cake. We skated until our ankles were sore. I took photos of him, determined to capture his joy, but every time the flash went off, it illuminated the empty space around us. The void where family should have been. That night, after I tucked Leo into bed, reading him an extra chapter of his favorite book to make up for the silence of the day, I sat in the dark of my living room. The Chicago wind howled against the window pane, rattling the glass, mimicking the storm inside me. My phone buzzed. I lunged for it, a pathetic part of me still hoping for an apology. Asterisk. Maybe a car accident? Maybe a medical emergency? Asterisk. I would forgive them if it was a disaster. I was conditioned to forgive them. It was a text from my mother. Asterisk Carol. Tracy. Regarding Sean's wedding next month. The venue requires a final head count by Friday. The cost is $1,800 per person for the plate and the contribution to the honeymoon fund. We expect your payment for yourself and Leo immediately. It's going to be at the Palmer House. Don't embarrass us by being late with the money. I stared at the screen. I read it once, twice, a third time. No, happy birthday, Leo. No, sorry we missed it. No explanation. Just a demand. A demand for nearly $4,000 to celebrate the golden child, my brother Sean, on the very day they had left my son sitting alone in a cold ice rink. The audacity was so pure, so unadulterated, that it almost felt physical. It was a slap across the face that left my skin burning. My blood didn't just boil, it evaporated. For 30 years, I had been the fixer, the one who smoothed things over, the one who paid the bills when Dad was short, the one who did Sean's homework, the one who drove Mom to her appointments. I was the software engineer who built complex systems, yet I couldn't debug the glitch in my own family that made me invisible. But looking at that text, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, final click of a lock falling into place. They couldn't bother to show up for my son, yet they expected me to bankroll their big day. They wanted me to pay for the privilege of watching them worship Sean, just as they always had. I didn't argue. I didn't type out a furious paragraph explaining how much they had hurt Leo. I knew, with sudden crystal clarity, that they didn't care. Explaining my pain to them would be like speaking French to a brick wall. I stood up and walked to my desk. My movements were robotic, precise. I opened the drawer and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. I took a pen, a black Sharpie, and a piece of cardstock. I wrote 3 words, asterisk. We won't be attending, asterisk. Then, I reached into my wallet. I bypassed the credit cards, the debit cards, the 20s. I found a single, crumpled $1 bill. George Washington looked tired, worn out, much like I felt. I smoothed it out against the desk, pressing down the dog-eared corners. I slipped the dollar and the note into the envelope. I sealed it. I addressed it to my parents' house in the suburbs. I walked down to the mailbox on the corner. The night air was biting, freezing the tears that had finally started to fall, but I didn't wipe them away. I dropped the envelope into the slot. Slamming that metal flap shut felt like snapping a heavy iron chain I'd dragged behind me my whole life. The clang echoed in the empty street. It was done, but I underestimated them. I thought silence was the end. I didn't realize that that single dollar bill would unleash a storm that would threaten to tear my life apart. 2 days later, the twilight was settling over my apartment complex. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic times, thud-thud-thud times of the knife providing a calming cadence. Leo was in the living room, building a Lego fortress. Blue and red lights flashed against the kitchen window, dancing across the cabinets. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the window. A police cruiser was parked in front of my building. My heart skipped a beat, an instinctual fear. Then, the passenger door opened. My father, William, stepped out. He stood beside the police officer, his arms crossed over his chest. His face was carved in stone, a mask of self-righteous fury that I knew well. It was the face he wore when a waitress got an order wrong, or when I got a B on a report card. The doorbell rang. I moved to the door, my legs feeling like lead. I opened it to find a Chicago police officer, a tall man with a weary expression, holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was my envelope. The dollar bill was visible through the plastic. "Ma'am, are you Tracy?" the officer asked. "I am," I said, my voice steady despite the thumping of my pulse in my ears. My father didn't look at me. He looked past me, into the apartment, as if assessing the value of my furniture. "Your father here," the officer gestured with his thumb, "claims you sent this to harass and threaten him. He claims this constitutes a menacing act and defamation of character against your mother." I looked at the officer, then at my father. "I sent $1, I said, my voice incredulous. "They asked for money for a wedding. I declined and sent a token. That's not a crime." "He says it was malicious," the officer said, though his tone suggested he realized this was a waste of his time. He insisted on a report. "It was an answer," I said, stepping onto the porch, closing the door behind me so Leo wouldn't hear. I pulled out my phone. "Officer, 2 days ago was my son's birthday. They didn't show up. Instead, my mother sent me this." I held up the text message. The demand for $3,600 total, the threat not to embarrass them. The officer read the screen. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. He looked at the text, then at the dollar bill in the bag, and finally at my father. "Mr. William," the officer said, turning to my dad. "Asking for $4,000 and getting $1 back isn't a police matter. It's a family dispute. And frankly, calling 911 for this?" He shook his head. "Don't waste our resources again." My father's face turned a shade of purple I had rarely seen. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold, devoid of any paternal warmth. "You think you're clever, Tracy? You think you can mock us? You're ungrateful. You always have been. I'm not mocking you, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, trembling with the effort to not scream. I'm opting out. Go home. The officer handed the envelope back to my father. Go home, sir. Dad snatched the envelope. He leaned in close to me, smelling of Old Spice and bitterness. This isn't over. You don't get to humiliate your mother and walk away. You'll pay for this. He turned and marched back to the car. The officer tipped his hat to me, a silent apology in his eyes, and followed. I watched them drive away, the red taillights fading into the Chicago night. I thought that was the climax. I thought I had won the standoff. But I was wrong. What they did next pushed me to a breaking point I didn't know I had. And this time, I refused to let them trample over us again. Has your family ever let you down when it mattered most? Especially for your kids? Share your stories in the comments. I'm listening. Stick around because what happened next changed everything. After the sting of that betrayal faded into a dull ache, I couldn't stop replaying how it all began. The police visit unlocked a vault of memories I had tried to weld shut. Growing up in Chicago, I was always the afterthought, the background noise in the symphony of my brother's life. Sean was the golden child, the sun around which my parents orbited. I was just a satellite, drifting in the cold, dark, occasionally useful for transmitting signals but never the destination. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it started, but the disparity was woven into the fabric of our daily lives. My mother, Carol, was the conductor. She had a talent for twisting reality, gaslighting me before I even knew the word existed. I remember the winter of my senior year. I had been accepted into a good university for computer science, but I needed financial help. I sat them down at the kitchen table, my acceptance letter in hand, my heart full of hope. We just can't do it, Tracy, Mom had said, not even looking up from her magazine. We need to save for Sean's future. He has big dreams. Business school is expensive. But I have a partial scholarship, I had argued. I just need help with the rest. Don't be selfish, Dad had chimed in, echoing Mom as he always did. Sean needs a car to get to campus. You can take the bus to community college. It's good character building. So, Sean got a brand new sedan and fully paid tuition to a prestigious private university. I got a bus pass and a night shift at a Greasy Spoon diner. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., smelling of stale grease and cheap coffee, then went to class, my eyes burning with exhaustion. I taught myself to code in the jagged margins of my life. I bought a refurbished laptop that crashed every hour, hunching over it in the diner's break room, deciphering Python and Java while my coworkers smoked cigarettes. Every line of code I wrote was a brick in a wall I was building between me and them. Every bug I fixed felt like fixing a flaw in my own destiny. Meanwhile, they bought Sean a condo downtown because the dorms were too distracting. They called it an investment. When I graduated and landed my first junior developer role, a massive achievement for a self-taught woman in a male-dominated field, I called them, bursting with pride. That's nice, dear, Mom said. Oh, did you hear? Sean decided to start a consulting firm. We're giving him the seed money. Isn't he brave? I hung up the phone and cried in the bathroom of my tiny studio apartment. It wasn't the money. It was never just the money. It was the absolute erasure of my existence. My father, William, was the enforcer of this dynamic. He was a man of few words, but his silence was a weapon. He signed the checks. He nodded along. Whenever I pointed out the unfairness, he would give his standard shrug. That's just how it is, Tracy. Don't cause trouble. Trouble. That's what my needs were labeled. Trouble. The only lifeline I had was my Aunt Janet. She was my father's sister, but she was nothing like him. She was a sharp-witted woman with eyes that missed nothing. She lived across town, keeping a healthy distance from the family drama. But she saw it. She would pull me aside at Christmas, slipping a $50 bill into my pocket. "You're the strong one, Tracy," she would whisper, her hands warm on my shoulders. "They don't see it, but I do. You're building a skyscraper while they're playing in a sandbox." Her words were the oxygen that kept me breathing when I felt like I was drowning in their neglect. I moved out, built a career, and had Leo. I became a single mother, and that only intensified my drive. I wanted Leo to know he was the center of someone's world, not an accessory. I wanted him to have the security I never did. But the habit of seeking their approval is a hard addiction to break. I kept inviting them. I kept hoping. Asterisk. Maybe a grandson would change them. Asterisk. The empty chairs at the ice rink were the answer. The police car in my driveway was the punctuation mark. But the real war began a week after the police visit. I was at Leo's school for the annual sports day. It was a beautiful spring afternoon, the kind where the sky is so blue it looks painted. Parents were lining the track, holding signs, cheering. The air buzzed with the high-pitched excitement of children. I was standing near the finish line, cheering as Leo's little legs pumped furiously in the 50-yard dash. He crossed the line, beaming, looking for me. I waved frantically. Then, the atmosphere shifted. I felt eyes on me. Not the friendly glances of other parents, but heavy, judgmental stares. I turned. My mother and brother were there. They were weaving through the crowd of parents, stopping to chat with people I knew. Other moms from the PTA, the soccer coach, even Leo's teacher. I saw my mother lean in to whisper to a woman named Sarah, a mom I often carpooled with. Sarah looked at me, her expression shifting from confusion to disgust. She pulled her child a little closer. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked my skin. I moved closer, trying to be casual. I caught snippets of their poison. Abandoned us completely. Sent $1 to mock her dying grandmother. Unstable. We're worried about the boy. My stomach dropped. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were painting me as a monster, a negligent daughter, an unstable mother. They were bringing the war into my sanctuary, into Leo's school. I saw Sean standing near the bleachers, looking smug in a designer suit that I knew my parents had paid for. He caught my eye and smirked a tiny, imperceptible lift of the corner of his mouth. Something primal took over me. The shame evaporated, replaced by the fierce, protective rage of a mother wolf. I walked straight toward them. The grass crunched under my sneakers. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face was calm. "Mom, Sean," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the chatter of the crowd. They turned. Mom looked momentarily startled, then composed herself into a mask of tragic victimhood. "Tracy," she said, her voice trembling theatrically, "we just wanted to see Leo run, since you won't let us see him." "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout, but it was sharp enough to silence the parents standing nearby. "You skipped his birthday. You demanded money I didn't owe you. And now you're here, spreading lies to my neighbors and teachers?" "Lies?" Sean chuckled, stepping forward. "Trace, come on. You sent Mom a dollar bill. Who does that? You're obviously having a breakdown. We're just concerned." "I sent $1 because you demanded $1,800 for a wedding ticket after ghosting your 6-year-old nephew," I shot back. I turned to the small crowd that had gathered. Sarah was watching, wide-eyed. "They didn't show up for his birthday," I told the crowd, my voice steady. "My son sat in an empty room waiting for them, and 2 days later they sent me an invoice for his wedding. That is the truth." "She's lying," Mom shrieked, her mask slipping. "She's jealous. She's always been jealous of Sean's success." "Success?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The success paid for by Dad's retirement fund? The condo you bought him? The business you fund? That's not success, Sean. That's an allowance." Sean's face went red. "Shut up, Tracy. You don't get to come here." I stepped closer, invading their personal space. "You don't get to poison my son's life. Leave. Now." The gym teacher, a burly man who had been watching the exchange, stepped forward. "Is there a problem here, Miss Tracy?" "Yes," I said, not breaking eye contact with my mother. "These people are harassing me. They are not on the approved pickup list, and they are upsetting my son." Mom looked around. She saw the tide turning. The other parents weren't looking at me with disgust anymore. They were looking at her with suspicion. The facade was cracking. "Fine," Mom spat. "Keep him, raise him to be just as bitter as you, but don't expect a dime when you fail." "I have never taken a dime from you," I said softly, "and I never will." My brother muttered something profane and grabbed Mom's arm, pulling her toward the parking lot. They retreated, but as they drove away, I knew this wasn't the end. It was an escalation. The next week was a nightmare of paranoia. I jumped every time the phone rang. And then, they crossed the final line. I was at work, deep in a complex code review, when my cell phone rang. It was the school secretary. "Miss Tracy, we have a situation," she said, her voice tight. "Your mother is here. She's demanding to take Leo. She says there's a family emergency." The world tilted on its axis. My blood ran cold. "Do not let him go," I ordered, grabbing my keys and sprinting for the elevator. "I am coming. Call security if you have to. She is not authorized." "We know, ma'am. The principal is holding her off, but she's making a scene." I drove like a maniac, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Asterisk. They tried to take him. Asterisk. They tried to steal my son to punish me. When I arrived, the police were already there. My mother was sitting on a bench outside the office, crying loudly, playing the role of the distraught grandmother. But when she saw me, the tears stopped instantly. Her eyes were dry and hard as flint. "You're keeping my grandson from me," she hissed as I walked past her. "Officer," I said to the policeman standing by the door, a different one this time. "I want to file a restraining order." Immediately. That night, my phone rang from a blocked number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. It was Mom, and she wasn't alone. "Leo?" she said. I realized with horror she thought Leo had answered, or maybe she just hoped he could hear. "Leo, honey, it's Grandma. Your mommy is sick. She's trying to keep us apart because she's bad. You don't want a selfish mommy, do you?" I snatched the phone, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I saw Leo looking at me, confused, fear creeping into his eyes. "If you ever speak to my son again," I whispered into the phone, my voice dropping to a register of calm I didn't know I possessed, "I will burn your world to the ground." I hung up. I blocked the number. I hugged Leo until he squirmed. Then, I called Aunt Janet. "I've been waiting for you to call," Janet said, answering on the first ring. Her voice was the anchor in the storm. "Are you ready to stop playing defense?" "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." "Good. Because I've been doing some digging. And Tracy? The wedding costs? The $1,800? It's a lie. It's all a lie." That weekend, I went to Aunt Janet's house. Her dining room table was covered in papers. Janet had been the family's unofficial bookkeeper years ago before she was pushed out by Sean, but she still knew where the bodies were buried, and more importantly, she knew the passwords my parents never changed. "Look at this," Janet said, sliding a stack of printed emails across the mahogany table. I picked them up. It was an email chain between my mother and a wedding vendor, the florist. Asterisk, Carol. Change the invoice to show $15,000. I need to show William the higher amount. Transfer the difference of $5,000 to Sean's Consulting LLC account ending in 4,490. Asterisk. My jaw dropped. I flipped to the next page. The caterer, the venue, the photographer. It was the same pattern everywhere. Inflated invoices, kickbacks, money laundering. They weren't just asking me for $1,800 to pay for a plate of chicken and a glass of champagne. They were running a scheme. They were bleeding my father's retirement dry and trying to bleed me, all to funnel cash into Sean's failing business. Sean wasn't a successful consultant. He was broke. His startup was a shell company kept alive by my mother's fraud. "They're committing fraud," I whispered. "Against Dad, against the guests, and against you," Janet said grimly. "That $1,800 wasn't for the wedding, it was to cover Sean's rent." The realization settled over me. It wasn't just favoritism, it was criminal. "What do we do?" I asked. Janet smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "We get a lawyer, and then we go nuclear." We hired a forensic accountant and a ruthless family law attorney. We built a dossier that was 3 inches thick. We had the emails, the bank transfer records, courtesy of Dad's shared computer, which Janet still had access to from helping him with taxes years ago, and the text messages. But we didn't just go to court. I knew that in the court of public opinion, my family thrived on lies. I needed to cut off their oxygen. I contacted an old friend from my tech circles who now worked as an investigative journalist for a local Chicago paper. She was hungry for a story about the dark side of high society weddings. We gave her everything. The article hit the stands on a rainy Tuesday morning. Asterisk asterisk the wedding scam, how one local family turning matrimony into money laundering. It didn't name them explicitly in the headline, but the details were unmistakable to anyone in our community: the inflated costs. The pressure on guests to donate to the honeymoon fund, which was actually a business account. The anonymous quotes from vendors who felt pressured. The fallout was instantaneous and nuclear. My phone started blowing up not with hate, but with texts from relatives and family friends who had read the article. Asterisk, Cousin Mike, is this true? Did they really use my gift to pay Sean's car note? Asterisk. Asterisk Aunt Linda. I knew something was fishy. I'm pulling my RSVP. Asterisk. Then, the legal hammer dropped. We filed a lawsuit for harassment and emotional distress, using the fraud evidence to establish a pattern of financial abuse. The court date was a blur of mahogany and tension. I sat next to my lawyer, wearing my best suit, looking straight ahead. My parents sat on the other side. Mom looked shrunken, her face pale and devoid of makeup. Dad looked confused, like a man waking up from a long coma. Sean wasn't there. My lawyer presented the evidence. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, flipped through the file. She paused at the email where Mom instructed the florist to falsify the invoice. She looked over her glasses at my mother. "Mrs. Carroll, is this your email address?" Mom stammered. She tried to deny it. But the IP logs which I had helped trace didn't lie. Then came the final blow. My brother turned on them. Sean, realizing the ship was sinking and he could face criminal charges for the funds transferred to his account, had sent a letter to the court through his own lawyer. He claimed he was a victim of his mother's manipulation, that he didn't know where the money came from. He threw his own mother under the bus to save his skin. I watched Mom read Sean's statement. For the first time in my life, I saw her truly break. The golden child had sacrificed her. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was total, devastating shock. The judge issued a permanent restraining order. She barred them from any contact with me or Leo. She also forwarded the financial evidence to the district attorney's office regarding the fraud. Walking out of that courthouse, the Chicago wind hit my face, but it didn't feel cold. It felt fresh. It felt like cleansing rain. The aftermath was a slow, quiet collapse of their empire. The wedding was canceled. The venue refused to host them after the scandal broke. Friends dropped them. Dad lost his standing at the country club. Mom lost her job at the nonprofit when the board read about her creative accounting. They were isolated, alone in their house with their debt and their resentment. Sean moved to another state, ghosting them completely. As for me, I found peace. Not the flashy kind of victory with fireworks, but the quiet, enduring kind. Our apartment became a fortress of warmth. Leo's drawings covered the fridge, no longer competing for space with wedding invites. I got a promotion at work, leading a team of engineers, mentoring young women who reminded me of myself. One evening, months later, I was sitting on the balcony with Aunt Janet, watching the sun set over the Chicago skyline. The city lights were flickering on, a grid of golden stars against the twilight. "Do you miss them?" Janet asked, sipping her tea. I thought about it. I thought about the empty chair at the birthday party, the demands for money, the police on my doorstep, the look in my mother's eyes when she tried to take my son. "No," I said honestly. "I miss the idea of them. I miss the family I wished I had, but I don't miss the people they are." "You broke the cycle, Tracy," Janet said. "Leo will never know that feeling of being second best." I looked through the glass door. Leo was on the rug, teaching himself to code on a Raspberry Pi kit I had bought him. He looked up, caught my eye, and grinned a smile full of unburdened joy. "Yeah," I smiled back, tears pricking my eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "He's the golden child now, but in the right way." I learned hard truths about family. Some bonds are harmful, not sacred. Recognizing that truth saved us. My parents and brother had chosen control over love, and in the end, they lost both. Protecting my son became my compass. Every decision, from blocking their calls to standing in court, was for him. Independence became my freedom. To anyone listening, I'd say this: know when to walk away from those who wound you. Guard what matters most, trust your strength, and build a life worth living. Those lessons carried us through, and they'll carry you. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Until next time, protect your peace. Asterisk, asterisk.